the most controversial comic book ever made. It's Sanctuary of Reality, my comic review series. Time now for Cerebus issue 186, the 36th chapter of Mothers and Daughters, and the final chapter of the Reed's phone book. The throne block continues to fly up through space. Destination Moon. Cerebus is ready for a return to the judge's domain. However, the throne block suddenly shifts away from the lunar surface and soon passes right by the moon. What will be Cerebus's reaction? Victor Davis concludes his commentary on life as he sees it. Each paragraph is distilled here to a single sentence. Emotion is preeminent in society right now. An anecdote about JFK being asked if he was ever in love. Journalism as a casualty in the war between the female void and male light, as so many reporters stress on how things make viewers feel. Victor sees much of Cerebus viewership as women with their male house pets whose brains they feast upon. In politics, good husbands and fathers are elected, while good career women are elected. Male light does not merge, as thinking reason is best served by solitude. Light does not breed. Two heads are not better than one, as consensus is emotion. Corporations show a preference for the family man, since they're wage slaves. Male light concerns the spirit, and merged void the letter of the law. A discussion with Jean-Marc Loiffcier at the 1993 WonderCon concerning the subject of relationships. Victor is alone, but not lonely, having not had merged permanence in 5 years. Women are not muses. Muses are muses. Victor quotes Jack Nicholson on the subject of women. An anecdote about Pablo Picasso and his wife and mistress having a battle behind him. Alan Moore discusses visiting the big white room where all the enlightened souls are men. Is sex or emotion more important? To Victor, it comes down to what you think is paper currency and what is gold. Victor addresses the exceptions to the female void, people like Coco Chanel or Colleen Doran, as male light is not entirely the exclusive property of men. There is too much birth in the world and not enough death. Jeff Smith of Bone fame reacts to this assertion negatively. A newspaper article talks about how much money is spent to clean seals after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, just for killer whales to come along and eat them. A discussion of a cartoon by Winsor McCay concerning death and time. Life out of balance is touched upon again, concerning how the universal mother of birth has too much control. You've got a better chance of winning the lottery than being the victim of a crime of violence. A coward dies 1,000 deaths, the thinking person but once. There is too much fear of death in the world. The dirty truth about polio. Victor recaps things in relation to chess and says his side of reason is under emotion's checkmate. Merged permanence tries to make another move but can't, as Victor Davis departs. He then talks to Exception at some length about why he chose now to include this discussion. Victor returns to the ether, but not without some parting words for Exception. Will this have any effect on it? So, this is the big, infamous issue where Dave Sim claims that only men are good and only women are bad, which is not what it says at all, but people like to think that it does. It is a bit uncomfortable, sort of like reading somebody's diary or hearing their confession, but it isn't the vicious diatribe that a lot of people like to make it out to be. I'm not going to defend Dave Sims' opinion on women or feminism. It's his beliefs, and he's a damn grown man and does a good job of defending those beliefs himself. What I am going to defend is the method in which he chose to relate these beliefs. There's been a great deal of skill and craft involved in putting the audience into the story, into Dave's head. There was great care involved in doing this, easing us into a direct encounter with the author on his own turf of the level of the imagination. Put aside the message for a moment, the delivery was done uniquely and deserves some praise. The methodology to it was incredibly clever, you gotta give him that, which you can't do if you're under the assumption that everything was perfect until issue 186. So many people find excuses to exclude Cerebus as one of the greatest comics ever written, namely because of this issue. Though if not this issue, they find some other lame-ass excuse like, oh, the series is in black and white, or, oh, it's from the 90s, 90s comics suck, or, oh, how dare they have female villains. NPR's Greatest Comics Ever list actually excludes Cerebus on the grounds of sexism and think of the children. Literally, that's actually their excuse. Meanwhile, a book that's a celebration of misandry, Bitch Planet, gets praised endlessly by the same list. I would never say, don't read Bitch Planet on the grounds of its politics, yet people do that to Cerebus, just because of Dave Sims' beliefs. Yet people do say, don't read Cerebus, or it was good up until issue 150. How hard is it to read something for yourself and judge for yourself? I don't do these reviews to decide for you what's good or not. Some reviewers do that, thinking that their word on the comic is the gospel, the final word, and they surround themselves by thousands of yes men who think that every single thing that Rob Liefeld or Frank Miller has ever done is some sort of personal affront against them, and it's some sort of crime against humanity that they advocate violence and hatred against them, without ever having met them. If you hate a creator so much as to rage about them on a personal level, here's a grand notion. Stop reading them. Say your piece on the last thing you read that wasn't any good. Just move on. Don't encourage others not to judge for themselves just because you've made this decision. If you can't get through reading something that has opposing ideology to your own in a small part of a greater whole, then acknowledge your own bias. Personally, I don't believe Dave Sim is a misogynist. Is he sexist? Judging by the very basic definition of sexism, judging by what he said in this particular issue, yeah, he's sexist. No crime against that. I do think he was too honest about his beliefs. Honesty is not the best policy when it comes to a creator, unless what they say happens to fit into whatever the current political spectrum is. As I've said before, his revealing so much about his point of view was incredibly ballsy, especially since women were a huge part of the audience of this book at that time. And Dave did do a lot to alienate much of that audience by publishing this issue. But shouldn't a person be true to themselves? Should they stifle their beliefs in the name of the almighty dollar? That's the message being sent by calling him a misogynist. Dave Sim has always, from every single thing I've ever read on him to having spoken to him on the phone, been about all people publishing comics, especially creator-owned. If you're creative enough and you have the drive to do this day in and day out, he was behind you 100%. It didn't matter your age, sex, creed, gender, race, anything. All people. Being an anti-feminist does not mean being anti-women. But I've never, in any research I've done on him, in any interview, in any comic message board, seen any evidence that Dave Sim treats women differently than men, whether they be creator or fan. He's never, to any of my knowledge, sabotaged a female creator in an effort to keep them out of the business. Yeah, he was a womanizer and a ladies' man, and he's very brutally honest about what a lech he was in these very pages. Maybe that kind of lifestyle left him with a less than positive view of women as a whole. But to assign hate to him is to lump him in with actual misogynists like Chris Brown or Harvey Weinstein, guys who actually beat or rape women. But let me remind you of a quote from Siren from this very phone book. Words are not deeds. Dave's words here are not his deeds. This is not a manifesto. It is his view of reality at the time of this particular issue. There is no call for men to overthrow women violently. If anything, it rejects violence as emotional. Think with your head, not with your heart. Be wary of relationships. And women be different than men are the main theses of the Victor Davis portions of this particular series. This isn't hate speech. It's emotionless observation fueled by one's particular perspective. Yeah, that part with the women eating men's brains was a little bit harsh, I'll give you that. But it's a metaphor, and metaphors aren't supposed to be pretty. Do you have to agree with him to read this particular issue? No, you don't. Even if you do agree with the overall concepts he discusses, no one is 100% sycophant who believes everything he says is perfect and true. There are things about his views that I found that I agree with, and there are many that I don't. But why should you agree absolutely with a creator in order to enjoy their work? What kind of echo chamber has to exist for you to enjoy something? Knowing Dave Sims' views on women on a social level does skew the work if you can't separate the pair. If you manage to do so, you may find this series as deserving of praise as any other comic series. Do you absolutely have to read the Victor Davis portion of the book? No, you don't. But I wouldn't recommend reading it without the rest of the series. Taking this issue and the text portion of this issue out of context as an indicator of how terrible Cerebus is as a comic is beyond asinine. If you want to use it to admonish Dave Sims' beliefs, sure, go ahead. Tangent, a lengthy discussion of Dave Sims' beliefs on a wide range of subjects later on in the series, also provides fuel for that fire, though Dave wisely didn't include it in the narrative, making most of its points largely irrelevant to the series on a direct level. But if you want to damn the series, which use incredibly clever and intricate ways of comic storytelling, in ways that are still today rarely mastered and were done here in no uncertain terms perfectly, simply because the creator used those skills in a few issues to express his beliefs, then congrats! You're an idiot. So, reads, worth a read. Next time, Siren judges the judge.